It seems like the wrong season, but I'd like to talk about precepts today. We usually do our precept ceremony in October. So, how many of you have read Thich Nhat Hanh's book, The Mindfulness Survival Kit? It's one of the books that we recommend if you're taking the precepts. And it's a really beautiful book. And I want to just do the first precept tonight and then have you add to the discussion. I love the way he rewrites the precepts because he really adds a lot to consider with each one. So if you know the Buddhist precepts, I know several of you have taken the precepts, and maybe a lot of you have not. But we start out with the first 5 precepts, and the first precept is about, and our precepts are just our guidelines, our ethical guidelines. And we all have ethical guidelines, whether we know it or not. You know, we all know. We all have our own morality that we live by or that we aspire to. But in Buddhism, we call them the precepts, and they just help us. The precepts help us recognize when we're not moving in the direction that we want to. A lot of times the precepts are there to kind of be a little bit of a flag on the path to let us know if things don't feel right to us or if we're uncomfortable. We can check our precepts and see if we're not living up to the ideals that we want to live up to. So they're not commandments and they're not laws, and if you break one, it doesn't mean you can't come back to the temple. They're very personal, and they just help people stay on the path. So they're beautiful to look at because you can take any precept and just keep going and working with it and getting deeper and deeper. So the first precept is about harmlessness. So in our precepts, we take the precept not to kill, not to harm others, not to harm ourselves. But I want to read what Thich Nhat Hanh says. And I might skip a little bit of his because he has a whole chapter on each one. But I'm going to read just a few of maybe the first paragraph about the first precept because his wording is beautiful. And we can talk about it in a lot of instances. Oh, this is just the first precept. Aware of the suffering caused by the destruction of life, I am committed to cultivating the insight of connection and compassion and learning ways to protect the lives of people, animals, plants, and minerals. I am determined not to kill, not to let others kill, and not to support any act of killing in the world, in my thinking, or in my way of life. Seeing that harmful actions arise from anger, fear, greed, and intolerance, which in turn come from dualistic and discriminative thinking, I will cultivate openness, non-discrimination, and non-attachment to views in order to transform violence, fanaticism, and dogmatism in myself and in the world. So I love where he goes from not killing to looking at the way we think, and if we're involved in dualism, and the dualism would be, okay, this is, I see this on Facebook a lot. I don't go on Facebook very much, but when I do, it seems like I'll see this. Someone will talk about how beautiful vegetarianism is, and then by the end of their paragraph about they're vegetarians and they think that's really wonderful, usually by the end of that paragraph, they're demanding that everybody else should be a vegetarian. And then heaven help us if somebody makes a comment about how they're not vegetarian and how they feel okay about it. Then the person who's a vegetarian and who's saying we need to protect life and we need to be, take care of our bodies, then they get really mean and they get militant. And the last time I saw that on Facebook, I really didn't want to, but it just got worse and worse as I'm reading comments. It just was calling people out and saying, you're really horrible because you don't agree with me. And I decided it's time to unfriend that person, and I do it the way where they don't know it, but I'm doing it. Because I see, and when I was reading the precepts with Thich Nhat Hanh's explanation, he just hits exactly to the point of that, right? If we have views that become militant and dogmatic, and it's like, I'm right and you're wrong, I'm right not to kill animals for my food, and you're wrong if you do, or if you eat meat, and I'm gonna make you feel really bad about it, and it gets into an argument. I think that really defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it? Because it's that anger and those toxins that release, that's what's poisoning our body. And to me, it defeats the whole purpose of what being a vegetarian should be about. So I think we can think about this. I was curious about your thoughts too, because I just love the way, and then he goes on for page after page. But here's another comment before I open it to you. In a world in which people use violence in the name of idealism, religion, or God, the first mindfulness training helps us transform our craving, anger, and ignorance. So we're looking at the precepts too, not just in the Four Noble Truths. We're always working with our own anger, our aversion, or our clinging. Like if we want to cling to, I say, the meat eaters can do it too. They can get just as nasty as the vegetarians, because you start poking the bear with it, whatever argument it is, and so if one side starts getting kind of nasty about it, usually the other side raises to the situation. So we're always working with anger, and we're working with desire. We like something, so we want everybody to like it, and ignorance, delusion. So I love this explanation about the first. Protect life and honor and find life sacred, but that doesn't mean becoming militant. And it doesn't matter what the reason is. It doesn't merit becoming angry, because as soon as we become angry about our causes or our projects, we lose our effectiveness, because our anger is not letting us see clearly. Our anger causes just a whole screen to come down. And so whatever our cause is, or whatever point we're trying to make, just washes away, because the anger is tainting it. I was thinking about, compassion fatigue that we talk about a lot. And I think sometimes compassion fatigue may just be, we get really close to something that becomes something that we really like. My daughter is working a lot with animals and homeless people. And so she has to watch herself, because she can get so upset when she sees something that's a sad situation, and she has to always be watching she's watching whether she's getting angry about it or not, because then it's not helpful. And I think that's where the fatigue comes from, if we allow ourselves to get to become overwrought or angry, because then we move away from the place of love. And love is what we really need to bring to those kind of situations and those kind of issues in the world. And it's hard for us to do that because we start seeing it like I'm right and what they're doing or what the laws are saying or what people are doing is not right. And as soon as that gets into it, it taints the argument. And we've lost that openness. And I think if there's one thing the Buddha talks about all of the time, it's about moderation, the middle path, and the always keeping our fronts open, keeping our belly soft and keeping ourselves open to other viewpoints and we don't have to agree with them, but we need to always be open to them and think about why do I disagree so strongly, or why does it bother me that there are other viewpoints? I've realized recently that the more I become involved in the Buddhist teachings, and the more I study and the more I, interact with people, the more I realize that every single teaching or way people can be it's all probably equally valid. It's just a matter of how sincere we are about it, and if we have compassion and love and mudita, appreciative joy, and equanimity, those 4 qualities. So it's all the things about the trappings, which is all this stuff, right? Even this building. That's not the most important thing. And it should be that anyone feels welcome here, and we're always willing to listen to other people and pick from that. I do a lot of things with the Siena Center, which is a Catholic monastery, and they have a retreat center in Racine. And I can't see any difference anymore between the things that they do, that the nuns do and the retreat center does. There's no difference between what we do, because they're doing wonderful work, and they're always open and listening to us, and they love to have me there and talk. I was talking last week, and I was invited there to talk about the Buddha as a mystic. And my first thing was, whoa, the Buddha was not a mystic. So I started off like, I can't even talk about this because I don't think Buddhists talk about mystics. And by the time I worked on the topic and the person who sets the program up every year has a very open definition of what a mystic is. So I went to my talk. They had Rumi, St. John of the Cross, and Thomas Merton, and the Buddha in a series of talks. And it invited me to talk about the Buddha. So I was talking to a group, probably half of them were nuns, and the other half were people in the community, and some were Catholic and some weren't. But I'm talking about the Buddha having his enlightenment experience. So I'm talking about the Buddha saw all of his past lives, just move, that was to me his mystical experience. He saw all of his past lives, and that was part of the night. And he realized that the self, he realized, seeing all the things he had been and all the lives he had experienced, that he came face to face with the self, that there isn't a self. And then he saw the lives, all the lives of all beings, all living things, and over like hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of years. And so he understood how we're connected to each other. And at the middle of that, I'm talking to a whole bunch of nuns about rebirth and stuff that they might just really want to chew me up about. But that wasn't the way they received it at all. They had great questions, and they were fascinated with the story, and they they could really enjoy it and appreciate it. And I realized that's so wonderful. I could have had a completely different reaction from them. Well, how do you know that people have more than, why do you believe in rebirth? And is Buddha the son of God? It could have been questions trying to fit Buddhism into their religion. And they weren't like that. They were fascinated and loved to hear the stories about the Buddha. And thinking about that, what could be or not mysticism. But it was so lovely to see that. And I realized it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter as long as we know that there's love in that group of people. So they're going to be open. I didn't expect anybody to leave that room and go, oh, I'm going to become a Buddhist. The program director is a Catholic Zen. So she brings a lot of stuff into the retreat center. But I had no feeling of I need to convert these people or they need to start thinking that being Buddhist would be better than being Catholic or whatever other people were. But I felt completely at home and completely with a group of loving people who wanted to be open to other people's viewpoints. And I thought that's all that we really need to do, right? And if we're all living with our ethical behavior in whatever path we're taking, with those little flags telling us when maybe we need to look at our behavior and maybe that's where our problems come from. So that's been my kind of wake-up call, is to be really aware of that and not be kind of smug. When I first became a Buddhist, I think I was kind of smug about it. I know I was kind of smug about it. Like, this is more true than the other stuff. Or this is more right than the other stuff. And I can't say that anymore. So I like your comments about these ideas about the precepts, or of this first precept, where you see yourself with that.
I kind of like what Sujata said about taking the middle path. Always take the middle path. And if I listen to a vegetarian, I might eat a little less meat and maybe a little more vegetables. And from a physiological perspective, there's certain amino acids, essential amino acids, that you have to get from meat. So that doesn't mean you exclude meat, but you might eat it a little less often. So the middle path that Bhante Sujata talks about is I think, a good idea. And I think that precept is kind of unrealistic sometimes, but again, you can always sway a little to the left and maybe a little bit to the right, but you don't go all the way to the left or all the way to the right. Try to take the middle path.
Yeah, that's always the answer, right? And if you now, here's what I can feel too. If I read something a militant vegetarian is writing about, and a militant vegan is just way out there. But if you read it and you start feeling that anger, it makes me want to go eat a hamburger. It provokes the opposite reaction in me. But and I don't think the Buddha was writing. I mean, that first precept I don't think is necessarily even about whether we eat meat or not. It's about how we live our lives, doing no harm to ourselves or to others. And the Buddha would never say, and there were people trying to pressure him, like his cousin monk Devadatta. They wanted him to say, say that we have to be vegetarians. And he actually said, no, I'm not going to do that, because it wasn't the middle path. And he probably knew more about health and nutrition than a lot of other people. So we don't necessarily get all the nutrients we need, and there are a lot of people that need to eat meat or choose to eat. So there's never any there's never any pressure from the Buddha. We have to respect life. So I think we should, if we do eat meat, and if we eat vegetables, we should be respectful of that life, and the way we grow things, and the way we handle the way we handle the animals that we may end up eating. We need to be more humane, and we have to make those choices ourselves every day. Anybody else want to say something or have had an experience?
I try to take the middle path. I choose to eat meat. I drink beer.
Thank you. That's good. Uh-huh.
Speaking about, if you started at, the dichotomy of vegetarianism versus meat, but it can expand outward pretty quickly. There's two layers that I think are important to think about. In vegetarianism, many of the vegetarians I meet, they have a clear-cut objective to reduce the amount of animal suffering, which I find to be a very noble objective. Anything to reduce the amount of suffering in the world. But what often tends to be forgotten, as you illuminated for us, is the process underlying completing that objective of lowering the amount of suffering. And what occurs often is the engagement in a process that's diametrically opposed to creating less suffering. I will argue, shame, induce guilt in order to decrease suffering, which when you say it that way, makes it sound insane.
Yeah.
It draws forth an image in my mind of two men in a field beating each other, one saying war and the other one saying peace.
That's exactly what it is, right?
One of whom is at least concordant with his values, promises the same as the other of whom has lost the way a little bit. It chooses to be concordant.
Yeah. If your purpose is to make people suffer because they eat meat, that's probably defeating the purpose. Yeah. And other things that when we talk about what life is, we're talking down to the minerals. We're talking, so imagine how we treat this world, this planet. Just the environment and the things that we've destroyed and killed, just as in growing industries and growing the economic marketplace and polluting the water. I think we have to look at all of those issues too, about how the fish, the life in the oceans and in the rivers. So there's lots of stuff to look at besides whether we eat meat or not, or fish and chicken. They're still living things, right? So I think it's a big, broad look that we have to take. I was thinking, one of the things we have to do here at the temple is to really seriously look at all the plastic bottles we use, because we don't usually like to drink the tap water here. So if you come to any of our events, there are just 1 million plastic bottles of water. And we use styrofoam. And we've got it, and that's because somebody gave us a whole bunch of styrofoam. So there's always, there have been, for years, there's this sort of policy, well, we'll just use it up because we have it. And I've been coming since 2007, and it seems like that the styrofoam it's had to be replaced. That's 11 years, and we're still using styrofoam. So there are things like that those are things that are killing the world, killing animals and killing us and getting into the environment. And we have to maybe set aside debate about what kind of food each one of us is personally eating and work on some other things that could be simpler and could make a big difference. So I don't know how I'm going to work that one out, how I'm going to get rid of the styrofoam and the plastic bottles. I need help. So if you have good ideas. But those are things we have to look at too. And we have to get real about that, get serious about that. We sometimes, our institutions get away with things that at home we don't do because we don't have to take as much personal responsibility in our institutions. But I'd like to see it.
Two things. With that, so much these days it's black and white. And it doesn't have to, when you paint it as black and white, people automatically go to one side or the other. Whereas just simply trying to reduce something, maybe not getting all the way, but just reducing your use some way, somehow, whether it's through straws or
Yeah.
it helps people at least relate a little bit better than you should never use plastic again. Because that's
That's not going to happen.
You're going to push them into a corner, and it's they're going to go eat the hamburger.
Exactly.
So
The straw is a great example, isn't it? I mean, that was a wonderful campaign. I don't know, does everybody still use straws? Do all the... Have you quit using straws?
It was a similar thing to the styrofoam at the temple, where there was a drawer that had a whole bunch of just straws from wherever, McDonald's or whatever. And so I was willing to use those, and now they're gone, so I'm not gonna go out and get more. But try not to.
Yeah. Yeah, we try to use up what we have, because if you're just throwing it out, you're creating a problem. But I think somebody's replaced the styrofoam here, because that was a huge box if they haven't. But we have to watch that. We've got to be watching things like that. If anybody wants to be on a committee, that's a good committee to have. But you're right. We have to look at. We have to take the middle path with things. If we make it too extreme, it doesn't. That rubber band breaks. If we pull it too far. Yeah.
Actually, I don't think there's a bigger subject you could possibly discuss than food. I mean, in the current events, there's so many different sides people can take, but everybody has an opinion about food. And I've been vegan for over 2 years now, and I don't even like discussing this because it raises my anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
I stay away from it because people automatically make assumptions. And
First assumption is that they think that they're going to think you're going to want to argue with them about it, right? That you're going to proselytize.
And for people that even know me and know I won't do that, they think I'm crazy. I mean, it's never how do you do this or why do you do this. It's just it's one subject that it's just. I mean, you can discuss religion and war and immigration. When you discuss food and people, you automatically put up walls and start arguing.
Well, and I'll tell you.
Citing all these research and facts on both sides of it that makes sense. You can.
Yeah, that makes me think about the debate, the book that you're making, that you're working with, the debate. That the Buddha was very clear about food. He always said we should eat moderately. We should eat in moderation. Because if we overeat, this is what he always told his monks, and it's good for all of us. If you overeat, then you get sleepy, and then you can't meditate. You fall asleep when you're supposed to be meditating. And if you undereat, it's like the Buddha was starving, when he was starving himself as a spiritual mortification of the body, to purify his body. And he knew that leads to killing yourself. So that moderation, that's when we have to figure out what that is for us or how best to do it. So, and that's not easy, right? But I love, that's when the Buddha, his thing is the middle path. And food was there too.
I've had friends that have had doctors tell them to start eating meat. And who am I to judge or,
Right.
That's, as you said, there's ethical roads to that too. Depending on where the meat comes from, how the animals are treated.
Right.
Everybody has a different path. If your doctor's telling you to eat meat, you probably eat meat. I don't know.
Yeah.
I find that not conflict with others, sometimes that internal conflict, because the more you start researching and you get down these rabbit holes, and okay, I'm not going to drink cow's milk, but the almond, there's a drought in California,
Yeah.
you can't drink almond milk, and then in Thailand they're giving Adderall to monkeys who do coconut milk, and so the more I find out, what do I do? And I have my own, so I'm causing suffering within myself.
We have so many choices, right?
Yeah, there's so many choices, and then you don't know which one is always the right choice, but I think maybe a little bit of everything then. So
Yeah, I didn't know about the monkeys in Thailand. Now coconut milk.
yeah, when I was in Thailand, I found that out. And I was like, what do I do now? I can't drink almond milk, I can't drink cow's milk, I can't drink coconut milk.
Soy milk's not good for you.
Yeah, they take those from the Amazon, the forests, they're cultivating the soybeans. So sometimes even without others, it's that internal conflict that you have and finding that middle path.
That's a good point, because that we have so many choices. It's just enough to make us sick, right? Just that inner anxiety over making the right choices. And that's again dualistic, right? The right choices. Just from the milk, what you're saying about the milk, there's no right choice, right? Everybody in here has just the kind of milk you drink, if you can drink milk, because I can't drink milk. But there's got to, is anybody right or wrong about the milk they drink? It's,
I think ultimately it has to do with what you feel is right for you. Because I too have been vegan for a while, and most of my friends are not. They eat meat and everything. And I try my hardest to not be that militant individual, but it keeps going. Because, and I too have been not accused, but just automatically oh, you're vegan. Oh, you must do A, B, and C, because there's this specific stereotype, but you don't fit that stereotype. And it's I don't know, I feel like she was talking about milk and whatnot, and I read this article about how since there has been more people in our country developing more plant-based diets, it's causing more suffering on the people the farmers and the workers out there in the fields producing all of the vegetables and fruits, and we are also destroying plants. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because you're saving animal life, but you're harming other parts of the environment. So it's
yeah.
it's what do you do? How do you promote the idea of relieving that suffering and honoring beings and living things, when you try to do one thing, but you're actually harming something else?
Right. And we see all that interconnectedness, and we see all that we're kind of, when we violate it. But the Buddha's point was always, we have to find a middle way. And I think that's for all of us personally, right? We have to know what, and we may start out thinking, this is middle path, and then this is my middle path. It changes. Mm-hmm.
I think I can create a parallel sort of story to help structure the conversation. So to invoke the idea of the two men beating each other in the field, again, one saying war, the other saying peace, one being concordant, you know, his objective and process being concordant completely, and the other having a disconnect between objective and process. I've also heard, you know, a fair amount of vegetarians saying that if they do not take on, you know, militant, you know, proselytizing attitude, they are allowing, in just a utilitarian sense, you know, a greater number of animals to experience, you know, immense suffering through loss of life, torture in factories. And if they really yelled at people loud enough and induced enough guilt and shame to lower those numbers, perhaps from, you know, strictly a numerical standpoint, you can say that through creating more shame and more guilt in human beings, you can kill less animals by convincing them not to eat more. But I would say that the suffering has remained somewhat similar because you're transferring, you know, the loss of an animal life, you're transmuting it into the suffering inside of an individual by loading onto them guilt and shame, which is the problem with the process that doesn't really create peace, it just shifts suffering.
Shifts it to some other field.
Which leaves us with kind of a really hard question that you're bringing up. You know, how do you actually, you know, lower the amount of animal death, lower the amount of human suffering in the world, also connected to it? I'd like to think that the answer is, in part, a lot of patience, because, you know, really stubborn people throughout their whole life will find out just because you're vegan or looking something, you know, good and sensitive, and eat up and full meat right in front of you and go, yeah, how about that? I've seen that before. But you got to stay very patient with that person because they're reacting to an idea of what they think you are. And if you know, become what they think you are, you react how they think, well, they think they're wrong. They're going to continue down their pattern because they think they're right. But if you really, you know, kind of sit and be patient with people like that, your patience is exemplary, and it's, you know, it's still far away from the conversation of maybe eat less meat. But it's at least, you know, the first little bit of shifting that can happen in another person's mind as they view you. And I think that begins the whole process of creating good relationships, good dialogue, and ultimately creating large change farther down the way.
Yeah, patience is really important. It's an important way to deal with anger in ourselves and even in other people. So it's really powerful. Yeah.
No one listens anymore.
No, because
Everybody has an opinion.
everybody has an opinion and they want to make it known. So, okay, we're going to wrap up. Did you want to say one last thing?
In my perspective, like all of the things that we were just talking about, a lot of the time, I just like to, like if someone, I wait till someone asks, like I don't go out of my way to promote something, but if someone's gonna ask me a question, like why are you vegan?
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason behind it? Then I will give an answer, or I'll just say, "This is an essay. I can give you an essay," or you know, maybe I'll sit down and tell you, or just simply say, "That's just how I feel." But I don't like to go. I don't think that it's necessary to explain anything unless someone specifically asks you a question.
Yeah. And you know, the guilt and shame doesn't work very well. That's the one thing we should know. I mean, it doesn't make people stop drinking. It doesn't make people stop smoking cigarettes, and it often has that boomerang effect, right? So that's not a really mature reasoning. It's not going to work. Okay, thank you very much.